this is a conspiracy. That's what this is. One big damn conspiracy! And everyone's in on it! I know what's going on.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
The person is smart, people are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
Did you see the memo about this?
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this.
Don't you see what this means? This is it! This is the beginning of everything! I've been waiting for this all my life!
Welcome to episode 63 of Your Missing the Point podcast, where we discuss the weird, the wonderful, and the downright bizarre aspects of life as we have conversations with people from all over the world. Today I'm joined by a returning guest, a thorn in the side of the heel of Zionists, the honey badger himself, Brandon Kroll. Welcome, Brandon.
Wow, a thorn in the side. Wow, I've never heard that before. Thank you.
Well, I do love your cup that you often drink out of. The one that says Zionist tears. There it is.
I thought it was fitting. Yeah.
Perfect. I thought we had a conversation that kind of delved into this topic in the last Christian Conspiracy Coalition, rather. But it's something that's being thrown around a hell of a lot lately. And I think historically there's been the word anti-Semitism, which has kind of shut down discourse and conversation. But now they've kind of conflated the term Zionism with being anti-Semitic, which I find all too amazing that they go through the mental gymnastics of it, because you don't have to be a person of the, air quotes, Jewish faith to be a Zionist. Look at the majority of the neocons out of the United States for the past 20 years. They are fundamental Zionists in every shape and form. And there seems to be a deviation between the understanding of what mainstream Zionism is. The average person on the street, Zionism is purely just the methodology of the Hebrew people having a homeland, and then there's the deeper, darker underbelly of it, which I've always known. Even before I became a Christian, I knew of Zionism as being quite dark, twisted. It's invasive of other countries. It's not solely about having a nation for the Israeli people or the Jewish people.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people quite understand that. And I get quite a bit of pushback now as a new Christian, especially when people say, if you're not a Zionist as a Christian, you haven't read the Bible. You need to look at Ezekiel 11:17. And I'm like, well, have you read the Bible in its entirety? Have you looked at the historical context around this, the political context? It's a lot deeper than simply a homeland for the Jewish people.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, if I had to break it down, I think the sleeping bridesmaids are the ones that are becoming New Agers. I think the sleeping bridesmaids are the ones that are buying this lie, because they're skipping over the verses. I would say primarily 4 is Hebrews 8:13, where Christ is the new covenant, where we have a lot of people still thinking old covenant terms. We have Galatians 3:28 and 29, that there's neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave or free, and of course, Jew and Gentile, very, very important. But now we're heirs according to that promise. And then as well, we're totally bypassing the aspect of Jeremiah 3:8. I have given Israel the bill of divorce for playing the harlot. So because we're skipping over Revelation 3:9, I think that's kind of the beginning of it, is that a lot of Christians, because they have this pre-tribulation rapture perspective and outlook, they're basically saying, I agree with everything in the Bible, except Revelation, I don't really care, because what I got from it is I get out before things get really bad. So everything else, they don't listen to conspiracy theories. That's a sleeping bridesmaid. We don't have to look into that because we're Christian. But you do, because the Bible says to abstain from all appearances of evil. So when I'm telling you about Christmas trees and they connect to the Hermetic tree of life, saying everlasting immortality, you're literally going like this to God. Well, I don't do it for those reasons. God knows my heart. It's like, if it means that to them, then that's what you're doing. You're now putting that in your life. And as a Christian saint, supposed to be set apart. So the whole fact that we're going back and essentially endorsing and allowing the beliefs of those who have denied the Father and the Son, which it says in 1 John 2:22, says you're an antichrist. That's Bible, not me. But we're basically saying, no, they're still God's chosen people. And basically what I laugh at, people who are saying that racism is not a thing within Christianity, they are racist if they basically endorse this ideology, because that is ultimately what it comes down to.
It does. And well, you mentioned this pre-recording of the last coalition, that when confronted by these groups of Christians that do believe in a state of Zion or Zionism, they very heavily draw from Old Testament, and like you said, they skim over the passages that don't apply to them or they don't think are worthy. And I'll often challenge them with, well, if you're drawing from the Old Testament so much, and I haven't once heard you refer to New Testament or Christ in any capacity, why don't you convert to Judaism? And because Christ is king, well, okay, Christ is God, yeah, that's fine. But you keep drawing on the Old Testament so adamantly, it's almost as if you want to. Why wouldn't you convert to Judaism? Because everything you're promoting seems to be in that light.
Yes. I think that's the terrifying thing, is that's why I'm very adamant against triune. Because by doing so, we're literally saying God wills it, which is going right back to the Deus Vult category, and that connects to Sol Invictus. And again, etymology-wise, that traces back to Baal worship. So basically what I'm saying, the significance of Father and Son is when we understand the significance that he could speak this celestial being to be the replacement of Adam, a perfect sacrifice, and we're just saying, no, that doesn't count. Well, now we're really going right back to what they were believing in his time. Jews, Zionists, whatever. Pharisee, to break it down for anybody who's already getting upset, Phariseeism was ancient. Zionism is modern. Same bird, different name. But I can guarantee you and show you, like I posted that video today, Jesus is a bastard. How come they don't let that be shared? That I have almost up to 9,000 now with followers, but that's like under 100 and something views. Because they don't want you to realize this is how we really think of your Messiah. They don't want us to. I don't know. I think it honestly comes down to a thing of cognitive dissonance that they've implanted with the people. And even though they say we're against identity politics, it is exactly identity politics. Is your ethnicity and your culture is better than your credence in the beliefs that you have in your scriptures.
Well, this is the issue. It's the identity politics when it suits one particular group or one political side even. But when you try to apply that evenly and equally, it just doesn't seem to work somehow. This, as we know, you mentioned the Pharisees, but we know this goes back a lot further biblically. It goes all the way back to the serpent seed and then forward, and it goes into the Pharisees, and then it becomes like Khazarians and all these other types of groups which kind of coalesce and commingle into what we call modern-day Zionism.
Right.
And we only really see as Westerners the political side of things, and that is the poor Jewish people during World War II, those who went through the Holocaust, they are deserving of a homeland. And anyone who questions that gets equated with a Nazi now. Because you know, the Nazis did this. Horrible, atrocious things that happened during the Second World War. I will not dismiss that at all. Right. But we quickly pigeonhole people into being hateful bigots, Nazis, and now anti-Semitic is being just coined with Zionist. And I found it quite funny that as soon as the likes of a Klaus Schwab or anyone else in the World Economic Forum, as soon as they started to be outwardly called Zionists during COVID, they started to call the term Zionist synonymous with the word of New World Order. And at its crux, the media tried to tell us anyone who uses words like authoritarian, New World Order, globalists, those are dog whistle terms for anti-Semites. Right. Because they know that word holds power. That word has been thrown around like slinging mud for so long. It does hold a lot of power in general polite conversation, and it's been used effectively.
It's the boogeyman term. And that's the funniest thing is I have quotes from like prime ministers and such like that. It's like, oh, it's a trick. We always use it. or just start weaponizing it. There was a Holocaust survivor, and I think he lived to be like 94 or 100. And he said it used to be somebody that was against the Jews. Now it's anybody who disagrees with us. And I'm like, well, that kind of puts the tin cap on it, because when you realize it's like I tell people, what I see it as, it's kind of like a bully that wears glasses. And he goes over to this kid that's like, smaller than him at the playground, takes off his glasses, starts beating him up. And then some people come over and say, hey, what are you freaking doing? He puts on the glasses. He says, don't hit me. Don't hit me. I have glasses. And it's like, no, you were bullying somebody just a second ago. And they're probably one of those fake ones, little buggy eyes or whatever. And it's like, no, we don't buy that anymore, because at a certain point what is it? Critical thinking. At a certain point we're like, no, I see compare contrast. I've looked at some texts. I've tried to understand it from your point of view. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing this as aligning with the Bible. And then you have the other side that, no, that's not politically correct, because they're still God's chosen people. So anything they do is still okay. And we're like, I think that's kind of what's happened. And I've been talking with Janet. In my family, there's a case going on with my dad. And my family's all getting paranoid and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm basically said this is what he did. But everybody's going, oh, you just have a different perspective about the guy. It's like, no, he committed certain things, but everybody doesn't want to acknowledge that, because if they do, it's going to ruin the illusion.
Well,
I think that's what's going on. Yeah,
absolutely. Even the modern day conflict of what's happening on with Palestine, Gaza, and Israel at the moment. Let's just go through just a standard, not objective looking at this, not biblically, just with the hard facts. Okay,
right.
This is what we're presented with. There was a terrorist attack. Civilians were killed in an attack, and people taken hostage. Terrible, abhorrent, absolutely should be dealt with. But we need to look at proportionality. What's currently happened is there's 30,000 plus dead civilians as a reaction to this. If we were to take the legal context for most Western countries, there's a level of self-defense which is called proportionate force. Mm-hmm. So if someone attacks me, they have a hammer, I'm justified to use a weapon to defend myself also. Proportionate force can also be applied to, if I see a little old lady with a knife, I'm not justified in killing that old lady, because in the eyes of the law, I'm stronger, I'm a large man, I should be able to stop that woman.
Right.
Well, if you apply that proportionate force to the context of a very well-resourced small terrorist cell took out an attack, opposed to one of the world's most technologically and militarily advanced nations on the planet, essentially carpet bombing and making Dresden look like it was a cakewalk in parts of Palestine. This is not proportionate. And I think this is where a lot of people are starting to notice this. So that's why we're seeing that dog whistle being brought out more and more. It's like you said, it's the great bully analogy. We're seeing someone who is bullying people around them. I mentioned this on the last show that my dad, boomer generation, he's noticing that now. And he's not a religious man in any way. He's raised through Western ideals. But he even mentions that you would think that a people who went through being slaves in Egypt and then the Holocaust would have a lot more empathy for people who were downtrodden. And we're not seeing that.
I think that's the saddest part, is there's no compassion. And I'm hearing Christians, I say that quotation marks, bomb them into the Stone Age, wipe every single one of them out. And I'm over here like, I see Christian in your profile, but I hear hate in the voice of Satan in your heart. And I think the term collective punishment, it's like, just because my big brother picked on your sister and pulled her hair or something like that does not mean you go after the little brother and start beating him up. It's like, no, it's eye for an eye for the one who committed the atrocity or the problem. I don't think that's what people are actually seeing. I think they're, like I said before, we've merged our theology with the war on terror. And that's kind of rebooted the Crusader mindset in the modern age. And we don't even see it, but that's exactly what's happened. We have a Bible in one hand and an AK-47 in the other, and we're saying, just vote, God wills it, because those are the infidel. And I think because we have that stoked in us, it's created this like Islamic phobia, that like we're veterans are going, well, what do you mean you side with the other side? Because for me, I've done some digging and I'm like, I kind of, again, there's definitions that they throw around for different groups, but I'm over here like, from all things that I've looked up, they've imprisoned a good chunk of like 40% of the kids before they even reach the age of 17 have already been incarcerated. So I literally can see it as, I see this kind of like the rebels in Star Wars. No, well, you guys are the Imperials. We're the ones sponsoring them, and the Emperor's giving their seal of endorsement, and we're all going over there. And like, that's what I'm seeing them as, because when they've been dealing with something for 75, 76 years, we're just expecting us to just shut up. It's like, no, because what I'm seeing is PragerU or Daily Wire are given the one side. We're not bothering to look at their side. And most Americans in the West, or the Western view of mindset, we're not seeing, okay, let's come to the middle ground. Let's see both sides of the argument. That's the scary part.
The Star Wars analogy you brought up is not missed by people of the Middle East or the Arab groups within the world. A Lebanese woman I'm quite good friends with, she brings that up quite often, that as the West, all our films are about the underdog, about the little guy fighting the tyrant, and they are the tyrant in a lot of these world theaters. And what we're seeing in America from 9/11 onwards, and it's kind of resurfaced now, is this idea that if you don't pick a side, by that very definition, you are with the terrorists. Yeah. You are a Hamas sympathizer. You are a terrorist. No, I'm all about humanity. I don't like seeing 3-year-olds being bombed into oblivion and women and children being crushed under huge amounts of ordnance. It's not an either or analogy to this. It's not I'm Team Israel or I'm Team Hamas. It's I'm for humanity here. And there seems to be this dialectic which we're being forced to choose a camp. And if you don't choose a camp, you are actually far worse than the person who actively does support Hamas. It's just strange mental gymnastics to be going through.
Absolutely. And I kind of chuckle because I've explained this to folks before. Like, I think it was September 23rd at the United Nations Assembly Council. Netanyahu shows the new Middle East, shows a map, doesn't have Palestine, doesn't have a good chunk of Saudi Arabia, it has a good chunk under Egypt in this map. It's the new Israel. 15 days later, suddenly the Iron Dome malfunctions, allegedly. From that, we then go from we're going to retaliate and annihilate this terrorist cell off the face of the earth. Okay. But then you have 2.5 million people that are being caught in the crossfires, half of which are under the age of 15. So you're essentially telling me that all that population is Hamas. And I'm going, wait a minute, that's statistically impossible. Like, I understand you have to weigh in there's civilian casualties, but when you have up to 40,000, half of which are children, you kind of have to go, hold up, the way they're conducting this is that, well, it's like, well, they have tunnels and stuff like that. It says, yes, but the civilians have been pushed to a border wall. The civilians. If we're doing that in America, let's try to, put that into perspective. It's like, okay, they started this in New York. Now we're all the way at the Mexican border. Like, they're literally been being chased this whole time. And they're not the ones who pulled the trigger. That's like all the civilians. Like, yes, I understand. I don't like most New Yorkers, but doesn't mean we have to chase them all the way across the country. Like, that's the way I'm seeing it. I'm like, I think that's what people have to understand. There's the extremities. And I think because we have that mindset that anybody of Islam, because the way they're painted, there's no chance for humanity for them. And that's why I did that video short of the Good Samaritan. It's like, I don't think that matters if you're looking at what Christ did with that analogy. You have the religious guy, other side, the religious guy, the other side. The other one's going, you're a guy that's in hurt and need. That's the way a Christian should be doing it. But we see the secular world, most of the liberals, like you were saying before on the other show, they're the ones given the humanity aspect out of compassion, granted, whatever their politics are. But most Christians are going, yeah, hurt them some more. I don't understand that.
It's wild, and I often do think that these, and actually I do know because I've looked into the NGOs that fund a lot of these Free Palestine groups, which I think ultimately are being used as useful idiots in the lens that the pendulum is swinging far to the right again. And what we're going to see out of these protests, these shut-ins, these sit-downs across university campuses that even started in Australia now, what we're going to see is a retaliation from governments is anti-protest laws, anti-free speech laws that are going to be hammered hard through this. That it's almost like a Venn diagram of all these things going on globally, which still somehow manage to find their way into our own local politics. And unfortunately, the empathetic side of these young kids who, like wrongfully or rightfully, are going out there and standing up for the rights of people who are being bombed in a foreign land, they are being used and they don't realize it.
Well, good observance. Yeah. Yep.
But at the same time, like I do go back to the Bible and look at everything, God said he would gather his people in Israel for the rest of the world to take note of, like the Gentiles, people who aren't of the Jewish group, to bear witness to what's happening. And I'm thinking, are we supposed to sit here and bear witness to the atrocities they are doing so that the rest of the world wakes up to them not being walking in the path of God or being in the line of what God intended for them? Because that's the true way that they're supposed to get the homeland back, by walking in obedience with God. And they haven't done that. So are we just bearing witness to these nefarious kind of elements that have kind of weaseled their way into the tree of Abraham, the Khazarians, the Pharisees, all these groups? Are we just bearing witness to it and seeing the rot on the outside of the tree now? Is this the point of everything that's going on?
Well, I think it's a little bit different from the usual perspective. But by man's definitions, that's what we're expecting. And I think also with theology, that's what we're expecting. But like, I like throwing a monkey wrench of contrarian perspective of just what if. Okay, we have this whole Marvel series coming out. So let's play that with scripture just for a second. But we're expecting the two witnesses, and we're expecting these two archaic individuals dressed up in cloaks and stuff like that to come around, start preaching, and like nobody's listening, right? But we have it in our minds that it has to be two individuals. What if that was two particular groups? What if you have the original Hebrews and you have the Christians who were grafted into the olive branch tree? So wait a minute. I heard Mr. Trump say that if he gets in, he's going to deport all these university students to go over there. And if we are heirs according to the promise, according to Galatians 3:29, and we are Israel, Christians, I don't think that's computing with a lot of folks. So it's like, what if that was it? And in a means of deportation, that at the same time, they put all their rotten eggs, quote unquote, into one basket. And what if it's podcasters and people that are actually having these conversations that are the two witnesses for 3.5 years? I'm just saying, because then all of a sudden, kill them. He makes war against the saints. Okay, they get killed. Guess what? When they get taken out, you're stuck with him. Don't know. Well, oh my gosh. That would be, wait, you were warning me? You were it? Yeah.
Let me throw some more what-if-isms at that, because...
Yeah.
Okay, so the situation in which I think John was right in the last episode that ultimately Trump will be very pro-Zionism, pro-Israel until the last minute, and he'll do something about it. But at the same time, I feel like they're trying to get their backup plan going at the same time. I feel like what's going on in Ukraine is just trying to get back the traditional homeland of the Khazarians. That could be a new Zion, for all we know, in the making. There's all these new world order and global technocrats who are investing billions and trillions of dollars to make it the world's digital hub in the future. They've just got to get the Russians out, and they've got it.
Yeah.
That's like they're getting their backup plan. That's almost like as if they know the plan's going to be bearing witness to the atrocities of Israel and things that are going on. Ultimately, the world's going to say, no more, you can't do this. And they're going to need a backup plan, somewhere to go to stay safe, somewhere to run off to escape and to endure. Because what history and biblical theology has taught us is that these things, these entities, these groups, they have lingered. They lingered, they survived through the flood. They survived through multiple cataclysms of God's wrath, and still they linger. And often they linger because God's chosen people didn't heed his word and wipe every single one of them out.
Right.
The humanity in us, the thing that makes us who we are, our weakness and our greatest strength, it left some of them around, and ultimately that was left to fester and the rot came back. The infection just spread. And this is the situation we are today. They may not be 12, 10-foot tall giants anymore or beings with all kinds of abilities, but they certainly have the mentality and the hatred for mankind still in existence.
Yes. No, I can totally see that. I think I saw something that said already Ukraine. I was like, yeah, it's probably nothing, but and some people were trying to say, oh, the crest photo I was showing, compare and contrast, it was like the sigil of Moloch showing with the current Khazarian crest, and you're just like, I don't know. Because for a reason, both wars was one right after the other. It's in succession. Why? And somebody was bringing up, it was a preacher, saying that the 3 ribs of the bear was representing Ukraine and possibly 2 other nation states related off the border of Russia. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I kind of wonder if that has anything to play with it, because I think people are clinging to the definition, with patriotism especially being pushed in our mindsets, that God is concerned about countries and gravel, dirt, and we still have it ingrained in our heads, a holy land, as in that has to be sacred. It's like, but no, our body, our temple, greater is he that is within you and all that. So I think a lot of us don't seem to understand is where the Christians are, that is his temple. And I think that's kind of scaring folks, because again, if you take those out, you just turned off all the lights. There is no bridesmaid left on the hill. It's now just bridesmaids hiding their bushels under candles, which is the ones that are like, oh yeah, I saw you post about that, but I kept scrolling. At a certain point, your keep scrolling is going to get you right to the point that God's been warning you about, to stay sober and be vigilant. But because you didn't want to see it.
That's it. Just to come back to Ukraine again, you look at the history of that region of the world, and for listeners of the show who listen to both of us, they wouldn't be all familiar with Khazarians anyway, but I'll mention it again. The idea that Khazaria was the last holdout Eastern European nation state that was still tied to Babylonian black magic. The Rus Sword Empire, the Russians at the time, were sick of what was going on. They went in, kind of cleaned house and said, you have to convert to one of the 3 Abrahamic religions. They chose Judaism. But it wasn't just a conversion. A lot of them were actually expelled from the nation of Khazaria, and it was kind of enveloped into the Russian Empire. Mm-hmm. Now, if we look what's happened to that part of the world in successive years, as soon as the Bolsheviks took over, and a lot of the high-ranking people of Bolshevism were pro-Zionist, air quotes, Hebrews, they induced the Holodomor on the Ukrainian people. So it's almost as if they tried to ethnically cleanse what was left of the original Russians, which took over that kind of area of the world.
Yes.
And now today, what's happened? We've seen well over 500,000 deaths of Ukrainian young age fighting men in that part of the world. You lose the men, you're losing an entire generation of potential people for that part of the world. It's an ethnic cleansing regardless of who's doing it in the first place. Now, people say this is Russia's fault, but is it truly Russia's fault, or is it the powers that be that are throwing these young men like cannon fodder against an overwhelming force? Where's the blame really have to sit here?
I think that's easy to sum up with the simple definition and etymology of the word soldier. S-O-L, Sol Invictus, and then you have D-I-E-R, which is destined to die. That's an actual definition. You can Google that. I screenshotted like 4 different websites, and I'm like, okay. So you're basically saying destined to die for a sun god. Because, like you just said, is it the powers that be? Yeah. Because you have Putin that has gone to the Wailing Wall. You have Trump, Obama, Clinton, you name it, guys. I'm not even going to go after the list. But they're all going to this wall, and Masons are basically are cousins to the Kabbalah practitioners. And again, we're not going after authenticity. We're going after practitioners of the occult thinking of things. Then yeah, they're literally throwing their guys out, which is the classic thing that they've been doing for war for probably like the last 200 years, especially. They put their guys out in the front as opposed to like a warrior chief. I'm going to fight with you guys because they're coming to attack us, or we have an incentive to have revenge on this other group that, it's really changed the dynamics. But when you start breaking down how they basically weaponized militaristic units, you start to understand the military industrial complex. You understand wars, and it's like, oh yeah, Russia's the bad guy. It's like, not really. It's literally this. It's like politics. Democrat, Republican, or whatever you guys got over there for your equivalent. It's the same thing, and it's like we're just throwing our soldiers out there as blood sacrifices. They're body bags. We don't care.
Yeah, that's essentially, and a lot of people who are, say, ethno-nationalists, which is kind of on the rise, which is a little bit concerning because, all races are under God. It's not a singular race that's going to be God's chosen people. And I think that's the kind of the racism we see out of the pro-Zionist camp. It's one group of people. But what a lot of these ethno-nationalists are saying now is that World War I, World War II, these were brother wars. These were deliberate wars to kill our group of people off by greater powers, which they just so happen to point towards the same people. Take that for what it is.
Right.
But we do see that. Well, I do see the First and the Second World War. Take away all the politics, take away all the dogma around it. It was brothers fighting brothers. Doesn't matter whether you're from Germany or England or America. Brothers fighting brothers. End of the day, that's what it is. The average person gets sent off to foreign lands to die for some rich man. That's what the crux of it is in general. Take out the theology. That's what it is. But now, being a conspiracy theorist first, then delving into theology as a Christian, it's so easy to see the symbolism within our armed forces around the world. You just mentioned the etymology of soldier. Within Australia, our army, our armed forces, the army specifically, its symbol is the rising sun, which is made up of bayonets that rise around. And this is all based on one of our very first epic failures of Gallipoli, where lots and lots of young Aussie men got up out of a trench and charged towards machine guns, gunned down and died. That was our biggest failure, but it's almost kept alive as a memoriam for these young men, which I think is great that we should remember the sacrifice of these men, but what's the sacrifice for? Was it really to save the freedoms of us back at home and so we could live our lives in the Western democracy, or are there other nefarious elements going on at the same time? It's a giant blood sacrifice.
Yes.
That's what these people, what these entities deal in. They deal in the magic of blood, the life force, the thing that runs through all of us. That has power to them. They use it, and they use it for nefarious purposes.
And that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. I hear your brother's blood crying from the face of the earth. Like, your blood has a tracking device. God cares when it is shed. And now you're going and doing this intentionally at the bidding of rich men. And I really love Smedley D. Butler with The War is a Racket. He says, I was a gangster for capitalism, like the Banana Republics. I was the gun guy there when it came to this. And this is a guy that was in the military for like 33 and a half years. And he makes major general or colonel. And you guys are telling me that his whole takeaway, I've literally wasted most of my life doing this. And I'm now basically telling everybody who will listen to me that what I did was wrong. I realized how the system works. And I heard a lot of people doing it. And I think that's also the other aspect of things is it's true with the resources. America has taken everything from South America, and Europe has taken basically everything from Africa. And now we're calling them third world countries. It's like, that used to be where all the gold and silver and all these elaborate palaces were. And what did we do? And now we're over here saying, well, they shouldn't come into my country. Okay. Sorry.
It's the ironic flip on it that, a lot of these nations, they were paganistic. They engaged in blood ritual sacrifice. The Mesoamericans, African tribes. Yes, all these things, they did occur. But then you see I call them Catholic Chads. And they're like, no, the best thing that the Catholic Church ever did was go into these countries and force them under God's heel. I'm like, well, God doesn't really force people under his heel anymore. Through Christ, you have to find him and you have to willingly go to Christ. You can't be forced to do these things. And is this almost and I hate saying it, the karmic reaction, or just the negative and positive reaction to this? Like, the irony of it, we've gone into these countries, we colonized them. The powers that be the powers that be have raped and pillaged the lands of their resources. They've deliberately put them at a stage where they couldn't progress and get to a level of societal cohesion and technology like the Western world. And now that we're getting immigrants en masse from these countries because life is at such a low rate compared to what we've got, people are upset about it.
And I laugh at the irony, and this is where, speaking for myself, like when I say terms, I say I share sentiments and elements. I'm not an absolutionist with party. Conservative as in I'm going to conserve my beliefs. Libertarian as in I truly believe in less government. And considering Klaus Schwab said that's one of their greatest threats, I said, thank you, sir. I just confirmed for me I picked the right one. And I think at the end, I'm very centrist and contrarian. And I like I said, I have this little political compass, but contrarian is always going against the official narrative because I sit down and I think, what's both sides' perspectives? And I get stones from both sides. And I think I hate to say it, that's kind of where most Christians should be, in the sense that you are able to see the humanitarian pain and aspects of things, but you also understand I can't just go impulsively and think with my emotions. I also have to understand and equate into this atrocities that are occurring, that I have a biblical outlook that I have to uphold. And it's not I got to go wipe. No, it's like, how do I handle this from a biblical perspective? How do I humbly try to acknowledge the hurts that have occurred by my fellow brothers and countrymen or whatever, and try to break that barrier? And I think it is possible, but I think that requires humility. I think that requires compassion. And I think it requires listening. And most people, they can't do that. And I did an etymology. Again, I think sometimes in Babel, because remember, the words were all screwed up. So it might be not the original, but city, like Citibank, that we have over here in America. I'm not sure if you have that in Aussie. But it means fast. Zen means to think or meditation. You merge the two together, citizen, fast thinker, fast meditating, So if you don't actually meditate and resonate, try to understand what's going on in our world, the history, like you read it. Now let's reflect upon it. I don't think we do that. We want to think fast. And I think that's part of the thing that's really hurting us as Christians.
Yeah, it's identity politics that has always kind of thrown us or hit us for six, that we fall for the team politics when we know it's a uniparty at this point. And what I've seen come out of this conflict, the modern conflict in Israel and Palestine, is that a lot of Christians have kind of taken this and, like you said earlier in the show, run with the whole, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorist approach, the very Islamophobic type of way of looking at things. But they've kind of taken a step further with the idea of Christian nationalism. We're seeing this big conversation happen at the moment with conservatives that want Western nations to be Christian nations, but it kind of flies in the face of what biblical theology is, that we are a people without a nation. That's what makes us so great. We could be anywhere in the world. We are the church. We are one with God. We don't need a physical land for us. And that goes, what they're almost kind of alluding to is closer to Islam. Like Islam, that by very definitions, it has to be a global religion. Well, what these young Christians who are, I think, very steered astray is they're trying to make Christian nationalism a thing. And the last time we saw Christian nationalism occur was we had the Crusades, and that really wasn't for the betterment of mankind. Sure, it repelled Islamic invasion from the Middle East, but then it went further and established the kingdom of Jerusalem as a Christian nation. And that didn't last too long. It's almost as if God never intended for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's basically when Europe became the United Europe States. That's kind of what, from my perspective, sitting here in the U.S., I'm just like, you guys do realize that this is basically Stockholm Syndrome. Zionism is Stockholm Syndrome for evangelical Christians at the end of the day. Because when you look up the definition of vaccine and understand what goyim is, you start going, wait a minute. So if most of these guys who are in charge of the production and distribution of this thing, and including top of their little tree is Corona, spiked crown like they put on Christ's head, you start going, wait, I am basically in love with my captor. Yeah. And politics is basically statistics of gullibility. There's nothing there for me. They don't change anything on my behalf. They never speak on my behalf. Like, I live in liberal Connecticut. I have yet to see a Republican in office, which, again, we might have had one in the 70s, but, like, lately, it's like, okay, so for the Republicans in the state, where's their voice? And it's no, we just go off the majority, because that's fair. like, but no, there's a whole portion then of groups that are, not they're the stereotypical liberals that are not being represented. And that's where I'm laughing. I'm like, you telling me I'm throwing away my vote if I try to go for third person? It's like, what's the point anyway? It's already thrown away. And you're telling me you're funneling it down so I only have two selections. You can either have cake or a cookie. And I'm like, I just want to have ice cream. No, that's not part of the options. It's like, but that's what I'm laughing at, is that they literally even funneled it down to the point where you have to pick mom or dad. And again, masculine would be Republican, feminine would be mom. And I think that's kind of what they do all over the world now. And people have literally become idolatrous with the thinking that government over God is the way to go. Whereas like we just put God on top of it. We, in God we trust. We put that, little lacing on top. And that's what we're creating, is a modern crusade mentality. And everybody's just thinking, yeah, God wills it because we're still siding with the good guys. So that makes us good.
At least you guys have they're pretty upfront with it just being the two choices are the one choice. Whereas in Australia, we have a preference-based voting system. So we can have multiple different parties we can put our choice in. So we can have the choice of ice cream, Brandon, but that choice gets filtered back to cookies. Ice cream is always a vote for cookies. Or say a donut. I have a choice of a donut. Fantastic. But the donut is always a choice for something else. We have if this filtered down, it's even filtered down further than that. So
wow,
it is an absolute disgrace that we think we have any kind of say in what's going on. But I was going to come back.
Just for a second. You're making me immediately think of fast food. They advertise it like this big giant burger, but when you finally get it, it's this tiny.
Right.
Yeah, sorry. That's immediately what I was thinking when you were giving that analogy.
It never looks like the advertisement, that's for sure. That's what we get in politics as well. I was going to come back to an idea and pose a question to you that I think a lot of people who have been down rabbit holes, and they may not necessarily be Christian themselves, they've come across this idea of Zionism being a nefarious threat to freedoms and democracy in the world well before World War I. Now, at what point does it become a group issue? Because you look at, say, statistics of crime, and I don't know, 1 or 2% of any particular demographic, let's just say they're gardeners. 2% of gardeners are committing handgun crime. Well, it's not all gardeners because it's only 2%, right? That makes sense. At what percentage point does it become a group problem? Because I think we're starting to see that percentage rise quite a bit, in which the rhetoric and the talking points that come out of proclaimed Zionists of a particular ethnicity or so-called ethnicity are saying this in their own homeland. They're saying this within the nations that they live in. And they're not the best talking points. They're very genocidal in nature. They're very destructive of the host nations that they're living in. But it seems like these talking points are getting louder and louder, but no one's recognizing the increase in statistics of this. So at what point does it become opposed to an individual problem opposed to a group collective issue?
Yeah, I think that does tie into politics at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of what they've intentionally done, is that they have been building on this pyramid for years to get us to the point on our American dollar bill to have that all-seeing eye guy to come and fix this problem. Because we're having tier systems and, the swamp, corrupt governments, call it whatever you want to call it, all over the world. And they're basically hyping us to the point where saying, well, now, like you said, they're weaponizing one side, saying we can now fix some of these free speech laws with the protest things. Because it's like in America, I read about Shays Rebellion, and I'm like, these are guys who basically were not paid and they're poor. And now you're basically saying, but you can't protest about that. And I'm going to go quash your little rebellion. And, I think that's a bit of the joke. Is every single time a protest does occur, they can use a military force and or militia or our military to eliminate said protest. And I think that's kind of the illusion. I think now it's coming to a point where they want us so angry that we end up wiping a good majority of ourselves out. They're building for an international civil war, not just America, like the movie that they had coming out over here. I think they're trying to build it on a scale where it ends up being like the Purge, in a sense, that there's so much anarchy and chaos that people are literally saying, all right, we had our politics, We tried fighting this out with physical force. Now we will accept anything to just make us all come together because this isn't it either. I think that's ultimately what it's coming down to.
I'm going to throw another what ifism based on that in just a moment,
Yeah.
but I have to point out the complete lunacy that all these protests that are happening in the Western world, for the most part, the governments that are in control are left-wing governments, and the people that are protesting against their government are the left, the people that vote for them. So they're making anyone who's conservative look very silly because conservatives never got up and fought back against left-wing governments, but their own people do. This is just a joke. Now, back on that what-ifism. I tend to agree that really they're going to put us in a situation where we destroy ourselves. And I think we're leading to a technocratic takeover where every aspect of our life is built on convenience, ease, creature comforts. Australia's now got a digital ID, which very soon will become a must-have. It won't be an opt-in option anymore. So we're going to be at this point where we're going to be a cashless society. All of our information's online. You can't do anything in life without having that presence, kind of like the Chinese social credit system.
Right.
But it's going to be so integrated with technology that if a situation where the grid goes down, we have a cyber polygon hacking event, everything gets wiped out, even for something as short as a month, that would cause absolute chaos. We are 3 meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with these people in these cities who eat through their stores very quickly because they eat, meal to meal, or they go down there buy a coffee, or what's in their pantry really won't even last a week.
Right.
And all the trucks stop. Nothing's moving. Nothing's getting brought in. Well, these people are going to turn to animalistic behaviors, which we've seen through history. And I think that's the capacity that's going to happen. And the people who do see themselves as freedom-minded and orientated or Christian nationalists, they're going to be the ones that band together and try to quash out civil disobedience, and they're going to become the bad guys in the end. They're the ones that are going to be executing groups of people because they raided a store or they raided a farmhouse for fruits and vegetables. But ultimately, we're the ones that are going to do the dirty work for the bad guys who are going to blame it on it was a hacking event or it was a solar flare, the Carrington event that wiped our grid out. We have to have the military there. I think that the creature comforts and the convenience that's ultimately going to kill us is going to be pulled out from under us like a rug very quickly, and that's what's going to be our downfall as, say, a Western society.
1,000%. I've already been thinking the same thing. And again, justifying it where it's like, oh, we were a militia. We helped keep the force because, we compiled together. We had all our guns and stuff like that. I think that's what it's going to come down to. And I think a lot of Christians, they're going to group into that mentality because it does sound right. But it's also like the time where almost like the best time for evangelism, because people are living in chaos and anarchy, and you're going to want answers. You kind of want to have a solution. Like, I don't know, personally, that's where I would be, because I lean more towards the intellectual side of things. I'd be like, okay, that's not normal. I don't always buy what my government's telling me. Now they're officially, somebody told me in my town that this is what's going on, and now we're all running for our lives. I kind of would like to have an answer. What's this God thing got to do with anything? Is he there? Like, I think that's what a lot of Christians aren't doing, is they're not looking at every event that they throw at us since 2020 with the perspective of how can I weaponize this for the kingdom of heaven, in the sense of how do I seize this and say, okay, we got a problem, challenge accepted, and try to tackle it with truth or making a platform. Like, podcasters soar through the roof since 2020 because a lot of people were like myself, where they're just like, I might not have much, but I'm going to throw what I got online, and look where we are now. We're having a discussion, and we can do so, but it also might help somebody with trying to piece something together with anticipation of what might be to come.
Yeah, these conversations are far too important, even if you're not looking at it from a biblical lens, just a authoritarian New World Order kind of conspiratorial lens. These conversations are all too important because, like you said, it can be those few pieces that form the picture of someone's puzzle they've been trying to put together. They've been racking their brain. Right. Something just doesn't work. It doesn't click. And that one piece of information can send them on a path of finding the truth to something that they've been just absolutely lost on. And that's happened to me quite a few times. It's been listening to podcasters, listening to other people. I've been doing research, and whatever has been going on, the research just hasn't quite gelled for me. It hasn't made sense until you hear from someone's perspective, and then you go, okay, great. Now I can run with this and look into it and see if it lines up. And far more often than not, it does, because, people out there, they are doing the legwork and their research, but it is incumbent upon us to actually double check and not just take it at face value, which is what I love about your content, is that you put in such hard work with what you do and present that I can look at it and go, okay, I know Brandon's going to be pretty on point with this, but I'm still going to do the due diligence and check myself. And
1,000%.
Most of the time, it lines up with the research I've already done myself anyway, so that's not a major issue. But we are in a time where our truth, God, that's a throwaway term. The truth is more important than ever, and actually speaking it, not being afraid to do so is the most important thing at the moment. We know we can't. It's the joke that the liberals in America seem to throw around, that you can't fight an F-18 with an M4. That's just ridiculous. Well, no, you can't. But we can fight those things with truth, because truth is infallible. Truth is truth.
Yes, and I think the word became flesh is one of the most powerful verses in the Bible, because when you understand that, the holy word was written by men of God, be ye holy as I am holy. And we begin to understand, wait, greater is he that is within me. He's going to give me the words to say. He's going to give me the passages that I need to say at that moment. And I remember one time I was at my former job, and it was a production company, but I'm sitting in the break room, and there's about 7-8 guys. They're sitting around, and they're opening up a pizza or a grinder, and they all, talking, but eventually the conversation started leaning on bashing on the Bible and preachers and stuff like that. And they were starting to quote some scriptures of what they did know. And I turned around and I'm like, but that's not contextually what that means. And then immediately everybody just turned around and looked at me, and I was like, well, I didn't want it as, this is not my intent. I just wanted to have my meal and, go out. So I started, basically debating, and one after the other. And then some people were going, I didn't think about it from that perspective before. And other people are just going, all right, maybe, I don't know, we'll get a soapbox guy over here. But for me, the way I took away from that is that's what we're supposed to do. If we are in the room, God had us there for a reason, and he's testing. Are you going to be my representative when I'm not there? This is just like sticking up for a friend when they're not in the room. I think that was kind of the mentality that we should have when we're witnessing for standing for truth is, you know what? They might be lost, but it's not for me to go, you're going to roast in hell forever. It's, let's try to hear it halfway from your point, and let me try to do a Mars Hill here. Let me try to ask you about your unknown God, because I kind of would like to have an answer to that. I have peace in mind. What's yours?
And that's the reaction they often want to go to. They want to hear the whole, you explode and go, well, you're going to rot in hell because you're a sinner. They want that explosive idea of what their view of a Christian is. Yeah. And when you do come at these types of conversations or debates by saying, well, actually, my interpretation of the scripture, the true meaning behind that is, and you present it to them, yes, they're on the back foot, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this person's not this preaching, screaming, crazy Christian fundamentalist that I envision them to be.
Yes.
And now he's asking me questions, and I'm having to respond to questions. They want that explosive reaction, and it goes more to the point that these conversations are important, because
yes,
it can be something as little as a conversation that can spark something in someone's mind and have them question and query the word. And if it happens to grip them in the right way, take hold in them, that could be someone who's saved. We don't even have to go out there and forcibly preach on soapboxes on corners and streets. We can just do that through incidental conversations.
I mean, here you and I are. We're on two different continents. We coordinated time. We're talking. But guess what? Now anybody all over the world can go over and click play and actually hear this conversation. And I think that's fascinating, is that's kind of what your testimony should be. So if anybody goes over and was trying to review, or they're thinking about what you said later on, it plays back in people's minds. There was another moment, and this made me laugh, because there was a moment when I went out to New York, and I passed a bunch of bums on the street. And I'm with my buddy who's an atheist, Sammy, and there was this one particular guy that I felt like I should have given him money, but I didn't. And I felt bad the whole time driving home. I didn't come over and give him just a little something. But it haunted me to the point where I'm like, next time I feel convicted, I'm just going to do something about that.
Sorry, Brandon. We just had a connection issue. It stopped just before you started your story. Can you repeat that for me?
Oh, just before my story? Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, okay. For a moment, you got really still. I was like, wait a minute, can you hear me, or is he just meditating on what I'm saying? All right. What I was saying is, with my buddy Sam, he's an atheist, and he was giving me, I don't know, a lot of feedback prior, but we went to New York for the day, and there was a lot of bums that I came across, but I didn't feel convicted about most of them. But there was this one particular guy that everything in my heart was saying, go turn around, give him some money. Go turn around, give him some money, shake his hand. And I was literally kept hearing that, but I didn't. I drove home, and the whole time I was just thinking about that guy. Like, I had a great time. I mean, I hate cities, but it was, fun nevertheless. And that kind of laid on my heart. The next time I hear that, I'm going to listen. And later on, I was working at a Home Depot. I picked up dinner. I didn't really need it. I wasn't really hungry. But I passed this girl that was sitting there with a sign. And I felt compelled, go give her your sandwich. So I did. And the first thing she says to me, and we said it in unison, God bless you. And I started laughing. I said, you know what? I think that's what it's supposed to be. Is that when you do feel that conviction and you're not tapping in, that's the problem, is that even when people are telling you, I'm convicted as your fellow brother and sister on this topic, but you'd rather just turn off that conviction or that message that your fellow brother and sister is saying because it's not fitting with your patriotism. It's not fitting with the narrative of the news feed that I want to hear. And I think that's what it comes into idolatry, is you are listening to ear ticklers, lovers of yourselves. They're feeding you what you want to hear, as opposed to being in tune with what the Holy Spirit is convicting you to do.
That kind of brings us to the idea, would you say that a lot of the Christians who hold Zionism in such high regard, they're actually engaging in idolatry with the state of Israel?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're idolizing it as, it is God's chosen people. It is the Holy Land. It's idolatry in every sense of the word.
And, well, I think that's kind of something like I almost want to do an episode just on that, is what is idolatry? Because, like, for me, I'm telling you what the tree means. I'm telling you about the groves on Dash Out. I'm showing you the texts, stuff I'm reading of anthropology, of other people that are even skeptical Christianity. They're showing me. But when I'm telling you, suddenly you say, no, I'm not doing it for those reasons. Or that symbol, well, I don't have it for those reasons. And it's at a certain point, it's like, well, what is influencing your reasons? Because he says, I test the hearts and minds of men to see if they really love me. I think that's Jeremiah 17. I don't know. Maybe 9:17. I don't know. But you know the verse. And it makes me laugh. And I've said, if it's the hearts and minds of men, that means minds, your thoughts. So if your thoughts are becoming idolatrous, where you're defending your denominational adjectives, your person, your favorite person, governor, preacher, whatever, and you're defending an ideology more than advocating for Christ and the kingdom of heaven, then you have your answer. You are religious and you are not a Christian. Because there is a difference, and I don't think a lot of Christians understand what that is. That goes back to the sleeping bridesmaid.
Absolutely. And just to go back in line with the overall conversation around Zionism, is that I've often, and I do this as a way to antagonize, and I know it's not a good thing to do, but when I see someone who proclaims to be a Christian and is trying to share the word, and they think they're coming from a good place, and they put out these huge posts about Palestinians being bad, and they're saying Palestinians, they're not saying Hamas, they're just saying Palestinians in general, the terrorists, blah, blah, blah. I'll often say as a comment, a Christian who promotes Zionism is like a sheep who promotes the lion. And the pushback I get on it is unreal. And I have to really challenge them on it, because when we look at Talmudic Judaism, like any Christian who's read the Talmud is, and I put a meme about this out, had Ned Flanders as just his lovely self, a Christian reading the Bible, then a Christian after reading the Talmud, and he's all jacked and got prison tattoos and he looks quite angry. Any Christian who hasn't read the Talmud, you have to go out and read it, because then you can really contextualize the idea of Noahide laws. And by the very first two laws of Noahide, Christians are on the chopping block, people. There's no other way to put it. We are on the chopping block. And if you are a Christian who promotes Zionism through that, it'll be Noahide laws at the same time, you're opting for your head to be cut off. Like, whether these rules and these laws actively become a thing is irrelevant. You are promoting your own head being cut off. You are the sheep who's standing for the wolf or the lion.
And that's kind of why I'm chuckling, because, okay, even this, I laughed. The trump shall sound, gates of hell. Now, it'll be like the days of Noahide law. Like, again, could be wrong. But I do chuckle, because what was the problem with Noah? Everybody else is saying it's going to be fine. It's been 100 years, dude. Nothing's happened. Eventually, when that door closes, the water's rising, and you have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to hide. And I'm laughing because when it gets to the days of Noah, we're eventually going full reversal, where the ark is being built right now with Truk. Again, that's what I'm saying. I think we can touch the Ark of the Covenant now, because that was where the Holy Spirit was kept. That veil ripped in two, now it's indwelled in the saints. So here's the thing, folks. If we are the new Ark, when we're taken out, it gets bad. It's fire. It's anarchy. It's chaos. And it might look good for the first 3.5 years. Like I said, I'm leaning with John, as I think it's mid for us. Like I said, people, I think personally it'll be more of they're just disappearing, and then he has to make war against the saints, and we just, and I don't think people are catching on to that, because the way we look at Revelation is like a lullaby. I got my prepaid stamped avoid the tribulation extraction ticket right here. I don't need to do anything. I just need to do a checkbox Christian, do all my little good deeds at a church building, and I'm all set to go. Everybody else is going to go to hell because, they should have accepted Christ and gone to a pastor. Where it's supposed to be personal with every Christian. Followers of Christ were called laborers. Not too many people are laboring. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. I can assure you.
No, they're sitting in a pew every weekend letting their ass grow. Yes. That's essentially what it's doing.
Yes. Yes, and I think that basically comes down. That is what idolatry is you're going in, sitting down, getting up. Blah, blah. Like when they say to stand up or sit down at church, half the time I'm sitting. I'm like, it's supposed to be a day of rest, right? And honestly, I'm not even upstairs because I want to be. I got kicked out during COVID because I said I can't live a lie in front of kids. We serve a God who conquered death, so why am I wearing an emblem of fear on my face? And they're like, if you feel that way, then you're going to be upstairs. Like, okay, so if I'm upstairs and I'm sitting down, everyone wants to ask me why. I'm going to be like, the guy up there behind the pulpit, that's why.
This is the one thing that I think has definitely given a lot of these people who have this very skewed view of what Christianity is. And it's for good reason, because it comes from elements of truth. Yeah. For the most part, not all churches by any means, but the ones that I've encountered, the physical institutions within towns, within cities, you can't go in and you can't challenge or question the pastor. You can't go, well, this is my interpretation of that scripture. You can't ask questions about giants. Don't ask questions about giants, right? Don't even touch that stuff. Don't even go there. There's elements of the word, of theology, that it's just not for the lay person to touch, because, those people up there with their special little collar and their cloak, they're entrusted by God to deliver the world. And you just sit there and you take his interpretation. And that is a massive intellectual dishonesty, because we are human beings. We have this fantastic brain power. We are problem solvers. We're astute at connecting dots and making connections. Let's do it with the written word. It was given to us for a reason. It's not up to one person to do it. It's up to us as individuals to then find what we take from it and share it with others. Because we might be wrong on something. Our interpretation may be way off, and you don't know until you throw that idea at someone else.
Correct.
We're not there to be an echo chamber to hear preachers' words bounce off the walls and go everywhere. It's like a tennis match. We should be serving, knocking the ideas back and forward until something sticks. Okay, I can't hit that one back because what you just said just seems irrefutable to me. That is a great interpretation of the word. That's the way things are, I think, intended to be. But we know mankind, we are inevitably going to sin. And a part of that sin for us is that idolatry of man being able to be the proprietor of the word, man being the one who determines the meaning of it, not its true intention.
Yeah, well, that goes back to Phariseeism. That's my definition and translation of scripture. You're wrong with your definition. Oh, you're saying you're that verse and is like, yeah, and I have the authority of God the Father. Oh, you don't think you're God the Father now? Yeah. And I think that's what we've kind of done with modern Christianity. Sadducees, Pharisees, bumblebees. Now we have Lutherans, Catholics, Baptists, and I like calling Baptists like basically watered down Catholics, because a lot in liberal New England, if they were a former Catholic, they're now a Baptist, but they still treat the preacher like he's the priest with such reverence and it's like, I really liked Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola, because you read that book and all of a sudden you start going, okay, so you're telling me why this tithing thing came around, why I do this. I want to know if I'm in the faith. Examine if you be in the faith, like Paul writes. And you look into the etymology, or again, seminaries, Semiramis. Again, that's like Nimrod's wife. Okay, that's probably just a coincidence. I'm sure denominations, demon, nations. Hermeneutics, the study of holy sacred texts. Hermes, the trihermes, which is another variation of Nimrod's son. And you kind of go, wait a minute. If they're already having these elements and terminologies interfusing and mingling within the church, we have counterfeit. And I hate to say it, guys, if there's a Christian going, excuse me, my bill is fake, or this thing that I'm seeing here, that's fake, because I look over here and the numbers aren't matching with scripture, and they're just going, oh, shut up, just accept it. It's valid. But I can't cash this in eternity. I have to make sure I'm living this because I am this. It's like, yeah, but who cares about that? And, God, just put your faith in God. Put your faith in God. But he put his faith in me to be his emissary. We see
the exact same issue within the Commonwealth. So Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all the British Empire nations, with the Anglican Church. And I've always joked that the Anglican Church is just Catholicism, but the diet version of it. Because the only reason it exists is because Henry VIII wanted to divorce many of his wives and had to create his own church to do so. Instead of having the Pope as the head of the church, the Crown is the head of the church. So we've got all these elements of, like you said, fake Christianity or forged Christianity. But
sorry, I'm thinking of the Coke.
Yeah, and it's just, and even like even the garments they wear are pretty much Catholic ones, but a slightly different color. It's like the Pepsi Coke analogy that we see with them.
Yes.
And I love that you point out the idea that a lot of the man-made institutions, these denominations or demoninations, it's done for a reason. And it's a subtle subversion of the faith. How do we possibly ever, as Romans, control these Christians that are springing up all across our empire? They don't have a centralized source. They don't have a kingdom. How do we fight an idea? We fight an idea by taking the idea. We take the idea, we sprinkle in some of our own nuance, some of our things, some of our beliefs, and then it is ours to control and wield as we see fit. We can see power in what they're doing. They're becoming powerful. We have to control that power. And that's what they did. They sprinkled in all the dark elements of paganism across their empire and made it a smorgasbord, a one-stop shop for the dark. It's like the cupcake is Christ. The sprinkles, that's where the paganism is, and that's the Catholic Church and a lot of these denominations wrapped up in one. The cupcake and the sprinkles are the danger there. It's not entirely all paganistic, but there's enough for it to be noticeable because it's on the surface.
Well, it's that is the whore of Babylon. What is a whore? You think it's love, but it's temporary, but it's not real commitment. It's not something you're investing in or giving 100% yourself. And that's what I'm telling people. Look into Mithraism. Well, what's Mithra? Well, if you look into it, that is essentially where Catholicism and a lot of Freemasonry comes from. And when you begin to see, despite what these researchers are concluding that, it was going on at the same time as Christ, but, eventually Christians took it over. I'm like, no. Well, they just rebranded and called it Catholicism. Like it's so crazy. Like etymology for priest was pontifices. Like, that's pretty basic, guys. No? Okay. Then son of God worship, sun God worship, Saint Peter, dis patar, Latin sky god of the underworld. Dis means set apart, patar, Peter, patar. And where do we meet Saint Peter? At the pearly gate. So when you start seeing that, you're like, was it Robespierre? The guy that said it was neither holy, it was neither an empire, whatever. It's not Descartes. Oh,
something very Latin.
It was French. It was a Frenchman. No, oh god, I'm forgetting it. But anyways, you know that quote. But yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, because that's literally what happened. Is this state religion became Sol Invictus, Mithraism became the occult and Freemasonry, and a little bit sprinkled out all over. But like you said, it's those sprinkles. It's like, yes, it's a muffin, but guess what we added to it? And you have to pick those off, or like, you don't like something on your pizza, you gotta pick those out, because those are the wheats among tares. Or tares among the wheat, sorry. I don't think that's Christians.
I think that's the unintended side effect of why we have thousands of denominations as a faith now anyway, because I think for the right purposes, a lot of people saw Catholicism and so, wait, hang on, there's elements of this that just don't line up with the word. So we have to make our own version. But they didn't remove all of it. And then someone else comes along, looks at their denomination and goes, wait a minute, you're giving Catholics all this gripe about them not doing the right thing, but you've got elements of yourself. So I'm going to start my own version. And this is how we're in the situation we have now. Christians are spoilt for choice as to what path they go down. And I think that in itself is the psychological tack we all kind of have to work our way through, because we're trying to outsource our own spiritual journey in finding faith when it's incumbent upon us as the individual to find Christ.
Well, that's what especially a lot of Catholics, like when I commented on Russell Brand that Catholicism is not true Christianity, and everybody's like, oh, the one true church, or like they didn't even bother reading. I said, I'm against all denominations. I said, but if you want to go to the mother of all of them, all the rest are bastards as far as I'm concerned. But the thing is, you are defending the institution that did 400 years of the Spanish Inquisition. You're defending the institution that did the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, between 5,000 to 20,000 people are executed, including babies' heads getting thrown up against the wall because they were simply Anabaptist or Protestant. You're endorsing the institution that basically says, Christ is dead and I'm eating him in a piece of bread. And it's like, no. At a certain point, as an individual in an institution, do you defend your institution as a whole and all its atrocities affiliated with it? Or do you simply say, I am Christian. I am trying to emulate that adjective of Christ in my life. I flawed, granted be that as it may, but it's through him that I'm taking the stand that I do as an individual. And instead, we look now as an entirety. Again, like we were saying earlier, they're expecting a radical evangelical or one of those people at a Benny Hinn scenario all falling down and whatnot. And I'm over here just going, no, this is this, and that's what this means. And I think that's kind of what it should be, because it's the individual moments that make the impact. It's not the congregational meetups. That's supposed to be for fellow believers, and that should be with any house or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever you meet up. That should be everywhere. But that's not what they did. They want us to be in huddles by the church-sanctioned ideology of the system. And I like the way you put this, the illusion of choice. It's the same thing within the church.
Absolutely, it is. I think it would be a good spot to close the show out. We've had some interesting little revelations from the Vatican and the Pope, kind of giving us new sets of requirements for defining something as being a spiritual encounter, as spiritual entities, and how we define it, whether it's true, whether it's fake. Now, the whole idea of a Project Blue Beam or some kind of a holographic technology being used to usher in a new world order, alien invasion, what have you, this isn't something new within the conspiracy realm. It's kind of been floated around since the mid-'80s. But I find it very interesting that with the world and the current state it's in, that the Catholic Church comes out for the first time in 40-odd years to redefine what a spiritual encounter is. Kind of leads me to think with my conspiratorial brain that maybe something is going to be rolled out at a maybe a localized level and then globally, that's going to shake the foundations of what it means to be Christian or what it means to be human. We know that the Catholic Church hasn't shied away from the idea that they put forward God can create life across the universe. And It just means they're a part of God's creation. So we can kind of see that the institution of the Catholic Church is preempting this kind of a false alien invasion narrative, or even the idea of the Federation, the Star Trek approach, where this all wonderful, powerful beings come down, aliens, and they gift us with technology and cures and whatnot. But as Christians, that seems like a great deception to me. So what do you take away from the Vatican giving these new levels of identification for spiritual encounters?
That's something I've been really wanting to do, because my arch nemesis, I'd say, was Billy Carson. Because everybody is listening to this guy like, Anunnaki, they're cool. Hermes, he's cool. And I'm just like, he's prepping you for Project Bluebeam. Like, I don't care how anybody else tries to tell you. Like, I've challenged him to a debate 7 times. But again, oh, you're a nobody. Okay, guess what? If I had you on a stage, we'd be asking some serious questions now. Because I've been reading your text too, and I have some questions from a theological perspective. I was watching another program as well, and the guy said that there's a book. He works at the college of, the bishops or whatever, and he wrote a book. Now, he's already been prepping for the Vatican, and they took it off the shelf immediately. So he's like, well, I'll send you my PDF. And basically, in essence, what the PDF was inscribing is, I have other sheep that you do not know about. Like, basically, in other words, he's like, wait, so you're saying that you're going to take this and say that Jesus was like a star child? And I'm like, yeah, I could see them doing that, because then we would get Jesus was Muhammad. Jesus was Buddha. And it was all just at different times. And we tried to help fix humanity for you. And you guys just didn't want to listen. But never fear. We're now here to help fix it and make it right. And I think that's what that Project Bluebeam is going to happen. And I do not think, personally, Christians will be around for that part. Because right now we're being built up to that scenario. But Christians at that point, we would not be needed. And I think that would also be the beginning of where the mark is officially introduced and implemented. Because now it's a universal cathode. That's where the root word comes from, universal. Again, Queen of the Heavens. I just did an episode like the origins of Black Rock. Again, connects to, a rock falling from the sun and or the sky. And that's going to be how they unite all the world religions. Because you look at the Masonic crest, founded in 1953 in Jerusalem, as the Islamic moon, as the cross, which is the symbol of Tammuz, that's Nimrod's son, and then has the star Remphan on it. And you unite all the world religions under this, they've come back and how helping us fixing how we ascend to our higher self and achieve that God consciousness. And it ends up being a Ponzi scheme where basically everybody is going to, if you accept the mark, the demon, again, that's the root server for all your electronics, they're going to possess you, which is the fallen spirits of Nephilim. They're going to possess everybody because they want their kids to have bodies back, whereas Christ is saying, who cares about who kills your body? I have your soul. And I don't think Christians are realizing. But me, I've kind of cut it down where I'm like, that's what it's going to come down to. I don't think we'll be around for it, but I think that's what they're prepping us for.
That new age kind of messaging of where it's Christ consciousness, and Christ has been here in many different iterations. Yes. That's why we see the same themes across history and time. We see this person who dies, comes back from the dead to survive. This idea is also pushed in mass entertainment. Don't know if you're familiar with the Prometheus series of films, the Alien sequel franchise, where I've seen
a little of some Alien, yeah.
The engineers, like the race that created aliens, they came to Earth and seeded mankind.
Yeah,
Upon interviews with the director on this, he actually let slip that his idea for the next film was to come out with these engineers wanted to destroy mankind because they sent one of their emissaries to Earth and they crucified him. And the reporter said, are you alluding to Jesus? He said, yes, Jesus was one of these engineers that came to Earth to give gifts and information, and the Romans killed him. That's why they wanted to destroy us all. So they're subtly planting these ideas within the subconscious of people, because it's going to ultimately, if they do have a spiritual kind of itch within their body, those types of small little seeds will plant and will guide them towards New Ageism.
Yes. No, I'm not surprised at all, but I'm just kind of laughing at the bluntness of, that's what we mean.
Yeah, that was Jesus. That was him. Yeah.
Wow. And I think that's kind of terrifying because everybody, again, what does that lie ultimately come down to? Is Isaiah 14:14, I will ascend to be like the God Most High, or saying to Eve, you shall be like gods. You'll be like the rest of my crew, the rest of the angels that are already up there. So they're basically saying you can ascend, become this pantheon, but you don't really need creator God because you got the elements. That's what the star Remphan means. Or you can say, no, I'm humbly acknowledging that I cannot get to that creator without Christ, who's my key to enter the Holy of Holies and have my name written down in the Lamb Books of Life. One requires that blood sacrifice. The other one is saying, my mind will get me there.
Do you know what aspect? Do you know what aspect of this whole New Ageism? And I think you're right in the idea that there'll be some kind of a Neuralink technology that's kind of fused in with this mark of the beast system that will allow entities that are void of physical form to take control of us. Our consciousness is going to still be alive. And if your consciousness is alive, trapped in your body, would you not be screaming for death and it not given to you? Would you not be in pain with what these entities are doing with your fleshly body because they're enjoying the pain, the pleasure, all the things associated with it because they haven't had it for so long? You would be screaming and begging for death and it will not come to you.
Mm-hmm.
So there are aspects of this this New Ageism, ancient aliens type of approach where there are elements of technology which are indistinguishable from magic because it's what's based on.
Yeah.
The technology that's being rolled out now isn't new. There's nothing new under the sun. This is just a revamped version of pre-Adamic flood technology of the fallen ones so that they can get their children back into little human puppet vessels.
Yes. And that, guys, that is what the Matrix is this basically like, oh, I want to go into this. I want to go. What was Christ doing? Get out of his body. And what was the difference? Let me enter you. Let me touch you. That's the effect of what Christ does. As opposed to the other guys, they just want to possess you. And you're hurting yourself. You're cutting yourself. It's like, I don't know, but I think about it, and like you just described, and I'm thinking I would be terrified because you are knowingly, or you're getting duped. It's a Ponzi scheme for your soul, but you are knowingly getting duped because of your own arrogance and because you were a lover of yourself, signing your contract to be beaten and slapped around because you didn't want to listen to truth. And I find that incredibly tragic, but at the same time, I tried. I tried the best that I could. I can't save. I can only do the sower. And some people are saying, well, what, they're not listening to me. Throw the seeds regardless. Let them fall where they may, because you never know. One of yours might get past the shield that they have up, the force shield. Maybe one, and maybe that will hit the main engine room, and maybe then they'll be like, okay, I need to put that fire. Oh, wait, okay, there's something in this fire. Maybe that will happen. I don't know, but
you just sparked something in my mind then when you spoke about the Matrix and how Christ was trying to leave. He was leaving his body. He was escaping the Matrix in a lot of ways. What do we see in the Matrix films? We see Neo, who's constantly going into the Matrix. The group of humans who are the good guys are constantly going in. And we see Agent Smith, which is supposed to be this bad figure. I think he could almost be an archetype for Christ because he's actively trying to escape it. He doesn't want to be in the Matrix. And throughout the film, he does, air quotes, possess people, but he goes into other people and kind of enlightens them to what's going on. So I think we get this mixed messaging in cinema that we've spoken about a couple of times in this episode. They're presenting us the truth, but they're skewing it in such a way to confuse and kind of trip you up into seeing what the real reality of things is.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the intention. Is like I said, everybody, it is the magician with the ball. I am showing you that ball was there. You cannot tell me it was not there. Where did it go in the meantime? And that's what predictive programming is, essentially, is I'm letting you know what is coming, because in their minds, we can create our own reality. But the thing is, we also, as Christians, can look at that and be like, okay, that's a bunch of bogus, because I know your end game. I know what happens to you. And I think it's because we have a book that was written almost 2,000 years ago. The written word beats you to your visual Medea, the goddess of lies and illusions. And we are having more faith in a textbook because we believe like I told people, I says, is there any reason for me to be living practically a hermit's life at my age when I would like to go dating, like to go out and do all this stuff, but get hate from everybody, all political parties, all denominations, because there's no reason for it unless I have this faith in something way higher, way greater, and way better than me. It does not make sense. And I think that's kind of what people need to see is your testimony is speaking louder to me than anything, because I'm seeing, I've heard you tell these other stories, or I see these things going on in your life, and that does not make sense to me. Tell me more about yours. And that comes down to what is in Peter, the faith that is within you. It should emulate thus that I know you're going through crap just like me, but you're not believing in the same things as me. What gives? I want to have an answer to that. Yeah. People don't talk about what's in the movies anymore. They just want to be entertained.
Yeah, it is the intellectual fast food, and I get it. I can come home from a long day of work, and I like sitting there watching the American version of The Office and just tuning out. But it definitely does a good job of it, and I think that mass media entertainment is there for a reason, and the subtle messaging in it is them mocking us. It's a mocking ritual. We're showing you what we're doing, and you're not picking up on it.
Yeah. And then there's somebody like yourself or other shows that do the breakdowns. And for me, I kind of laugh because I'm like, they're showing you the magician's handbook. A lot of them are asking me like, well, if Trump's the bad guy, I was like, okay, look at it this way. It's a circus. The magician came out. He did a whole bunch of fireworks, pulled a bunny out of the hat. You loved it. You all were cheering. Now the goofy, bombarous clown comes walking out. Oh, come on, stupid. Boo, boo, boo. Give us back the magician. Give us back the magician. And he comes back out. Again, MAGA means magician, by the way, folks. So I'm kind of, that's my best analogy, because I'm trying to paint for folks, like if I had to break it down, you see Mari flirting with Catholicism. You see Candace Owens flirting with Jordan Peterson, Russell Brand. And at a certain point, you're seeing a lot of them all going through a persecution phase. They kicked me off YouTube. Now I'll go to Rumble. But you're seeing as well, that's what they're trying to paint for you. If the persecuted guy, the one that I like listening to, Tucker, whatever you want to put in, fill in blank with said news host, if they're being persecuted, and that's the stuff that I agree with, then that's the side I want to go with. And I think that's kind of what they've created is you're literally saying, oh, because my Messiah, my prophet, my guy is being the guy, I am him. I am Negan. It's going right back to The Walking Dead, is that you're literally just going, oh, so you are a zombie.
I equate it to like the bait and switch, all these, I call them discourse shapers, people that are deliberately put in the public eye to draw attention and guide the conversation. Your Russell Brands, your Tuckers, all these people who you said are being targeted, so you feel inclined by being within his political thinking to align with him. Well, the bait and switch is going to be, they draw Christians in, but they may be flirting with Catholicism, but they're more New Ages than anything else.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be the pivot. There's going to be a pivot of the established Catholic Church is going to keep tiptoeing its way towards this New Ageism, in which they're going to be the dominant church in the world, the one of the largest religions, that's going to float the idea of all religions are one and the same. And they're going to be the ones leading the way on that.
That's where I'm at as well. And I think, especially when they say basically Christ was everybody, all the ones that were the most immortalized in our society, that's going to be the Antichrist just showed his hand of who he really is. And whether people are, so I'm laughing because everybody says, oh, he's going to be humble. And I'm like, but you worship the image of the beast. So that sounds like a narcissist if you're asking me. Because a lot of people are always saying like, oh, he's going to be, speaking because he also roars like a dragon. So who's currently in the U.S. going through a trial? Who was an insurrectionist? Well, remember Jesus and Barabbas? What did the crowd choose? We want the insurrectionist.
And I think the idea with Trump is also that people refer to the Antichrist. It can't be Trump because everyone's supposed to love the Antichrist. I'm like, from a certain perspective, everyone does love Trump because it's not just the US. It's the conservatives across the world. People who have no connection to your political sphere whatsoever love Trump and promote him.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like an Antichrist to me because everyone does love him.
And again, if chaos hits the street, if you've been injected with miracle juice, what's left standing? All of the people you just referred to. That's what I told, like, my buddy was like, when you're doing conspiracy theories, you ever come up to something where you might be wrong? I'm like, not really. And it's conspiracy theory, not theories, because they all interconnect in some way, shape, or form. It's basically a body and it has a lot of veins, but they all interconnect to the core. And I'm trying to break it down for him where I says there's people doing a gesture, doing a sign. And again, you could be just like doing the presentation. You're pointing at something and it's like, okay. But then there's other people that are going like this all the time or doing, and that's where I start going, okay, we put that into the box, and eventually that box starts overflowing. That's how I, you should be taking statistical data with every single person that's out there because you don't want to be deceived by false teachers. So take it with a grain of salt, and if it starts over-teetering, that's when you're supposed to be as wise as a serpent and say, I'm going to have to cut that tie, because that is not supposed to be within a believer's life. And then start calling it out. And everybody's like, oh, he's a man of faith. You shouldn't do that. And it's like, Paul called out 8 false teachers by name in letters, written form. And he describes exactly where their theology is pulling people away from the faith. That should be the modern church. But again, we're getting more people defending the person. And that's something, the biggest thing with QAnon, like I did with the post yesterday. Trump is the only one. Not Obama, not Prince Charles, King Charles, whatever. None of them. The only one where I get a bunch of unfollows are on Trump. Why? I've never seen that with anybody else in my entire life, but you do something on him, despite showing them visual proof and quotes, audible, they're saying no. And that's where it makes me think it has to be the Great Deception, because I've never seen that with anybody else in my life, and it's only with him that I've seen that.
I've noticed a weird dialectic change within the QAnon groups, because I follow the QAnon groups in Australia, which are surprisingly very large and quite honestly very scary in their thinking about this guy. And what I've noticed is, much like yourself, if you besmirch or talk bad against Trump, either you're unfollowed or you're attacked. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing I've found, it ties back to Zionism now, is that the QAnon people, out of nowhere, are just pro-Israel and pro-Zionism all of a sudden, where Q drops were saying we're leaving Israel for last. And now if you think conspiratorial, that would mean, we're taking Israel out. But all of a sudden they're on Israel's side and they're on Zionism's side. It just seems that these people they're taken for a ride with hopium. They got to a point where a lot of us get to as conspiracy theorists that, geez, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world, and I'm starting to see it everywhere. I'm connecting those dots. It's over here. It's over there. It's happening everywhere. There's no hope for me. Look. Here's Q for you. Dangle a little bit of hope for you. Don't worry. It's a big operation. It's fine. It's going to take time. They give a date. The date comes around. Nothing happens. Oh, no. It's a bigger operation than that. It's all the way over here now, but it's fine. The white hats are coming to save you. We're working behind the scenes. It ties in with Operation Trust that we saw the communists use. That's how the communists they toppled the Russian monarchy by spreading disinformation campaigns that there were pure monarchists stopping the Bolshevik uprisings, and it wasn't true. And the people fell for it because it was presented to them in an air of hope.
Right. And that's, again, it's a false hope. Not a new hope, a false hope. And I find it tragic because you literally are putting your faith more in man rather than Christ. And I've asked this to somebody once, and they said, Christ or country? And he got quiet, and I said, it can't be both. You had to pick one or the other. And he was like, I can't answer that. And I was like, whoa, okay, dude. When it comes to the kingdom of heaven, it's not of this world. And if you are really in that much of a dilemma between choosing Christ or your country, that's a scary predicament, because we get 1 Samuel 8, and you get God's heart. I don't want them to have a king, but if they really want one, then Samuel give them somebody. And he selects who that's going to, again, and it's not by his choice. It's not his preferred choice. I want to lead them. And I think that's where a lot of Christians are not getting it, is that we are constantly putting man, lovers of themselves, on a pedestal, as opposed to saying, I am a servant. I am beneath this creator. And we were not really appreciating, I think, was it Isaiah? That your good deeds are like filthy rags. And if you translate that, that's menstrual rags. It's like, wait a minute. You're telling me on my best day, where I'm giving everything to everybody, I am being the best preacher boy. I'm, wearing my nines and stuff. You're telling me that's how good I am? Yeah. That's
This
says a lot.
This comes back to the whole idea of the weaponization of patriotism, and that is used as kind of the out that kind of leads to Christian nationalism, is that I can choose my country as long as my country's driven by Christianity. Then it's fine, because then I have chosen Christ via association. No, you've chosen the country first, and then you're trying to put a big sticker of Christ on top of it and proclaiming it's the right choice. You're not going about it the right way, friends. I'm sorry. A nation, as important as a nation can be, Christ ultimately has to come first in this situation. You're not an American first and then a Christian. You're a Christian first. You're a Christian American, not an American Christian. It's just the way it is.
It's like buying a Tesla, then putting "don't tread on me."
Oh, it's like I've got a Fiat. I've got a Fiat, and I put a Ferrari seat in it, so it classifies as Ferrari now.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, this has been a great conversation, mate. Where can the listeners find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Krollology, _101, Kroll like my name on the screen. If you can find me. A lot of people are saying they're sharing my stuff and nothing shows up to them. So good luck. I might be getting the boot soon. If that does happen, Manna Daily Podcast will probably be some form or pop up, so that should be easy to find. And Manna Daily Podcast for Rumble and YouTube for other episodes and presentations and conversations like this. I absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem at all, mate. Definitely need to have this one. Welcome to the Shadow Band crew. I've been there for quite a while now, and I'm not digging my way out anytime soon. You better invest in a hard hat with a light on top, because you have to get very, very good at savvily sharing your work around, and you should find a few little tricks to the trade. For anyone who's listening to me on any of Brandon's platforms, I'm Drew Missen of You're Missing the Point podcast, MISSEN, and you can find me on all the usual podcatchers. And on that note, we will catch you next time.
Hey everybody, it's closing time. You don't gotta go home, but you can't stay here.